Oh, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
This is 476 Barbary, right?
Yeah, I'm renting this place.
No, I booked it a month ago.
Are you sure you have the right place?
Yeah. What am I supposed to do?
Why don't you come inside, and we'll call these idiots. Why don't you just crash here?
Oh, no.
I don't know if you got a great look at this neighborhood, but I don't think you should be out there by yourself. It's dry and there's a lock on the door. By the way, I'm Keith.
Tess.
You take the bedroom, and I'll sleep out here on the couch.
God. Keith?
This process might seem overwhelming, but with a little practice, it can soon become a pleasurable experience. This is perfectly natural.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very exciting and interesting bonus mini episode of Citizen Dame, the podcast where we sometimes disagree on stuff. I am Lauren Humphreys Brooks, and with me, as always, is Karen Peterson. Hello, Karen.
Hello. Occasionally we disagree, just occasionally.
Occasionally we disagree, and I think that this the topic of this episode is one that I'm sad. I'm sad that I have the feelings that I do about this film, because I really went into it like, oh, this is going to be great, man. Like, I've been waiting for this to come out. I can't wait. And I have never, I've not been this angry about a movie since like Blade Runner 2049 for different reasons.
Yeah.
For different reasons. So it's not entirely saying that. So the movie we're going to talk about, and we are going to spoil the crap out of it. So just to tell everyone that before we get going, we are going to talk about Barbarian, which is the recent horror film that came out. It's been released. It was released in theaters earlier this year, and it recently came out on HBO Max. It stars Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long, and was written and directed by Zach Cregger in his solo directorial debut. It is a horror film. It's in a lot of ways a very creepy horror film, it places a very violent one. And we are going to talk about it. We are going to spoil it. So if you have not seen it and you want to go into it unspoiled, turn this off, go watch it on HBO Max, come back, and you can listen and hear all of our amazing thoughts about this movie.
Yes.
So Barbarian, sort of the basic construction of the plot, at least the beginning of it, is about this young woman who shows up in a Detroit kind of neighborhood, and where she's rented an Airbnb because she is in town for a job interview, and she discovers that she's double booked it with a young man played by Bill Skarsgård, who shows up at the door and says like, oh no, I'm booked here. And they have this sort of very interesting opening sequence where the two of them talk, and of course she's very mistrustful, as she would be, about this man who has like popped up in the place that she was supposed to be staying in on a dark and stormy night, and so why don't we start with that, because I think that this is the strongest part of the film. this kind of back and forth, and it does develop really well, all of these questions of red flags, right? And how you navigate that, because here's this young woman who is in a city that she doesn't know, in a neighborhood she doesn't know. She has just shown up at her Airbnb and basically discovers that there's a man there, a man that she doesn't know. And they're having this back and forth conversation about what she should do, what she wants to do. She's obviously very nervous about it. He's trying to kind of be respectful as apparently, but at the same time, he's Bill Skarsgård. And you're like, you could be a psychopathic killer.
Oh, yeah. Casting him was very deliberate. They knew exactly what they were doing by casting Bill Skarsgård in this role, because of the fact that he's Bill Skarsgård, even though he's a cute guy, we automatically just don't trust him because he usually is a psycho killer, like, Pennywise and some other roles that I can't think of right now. But yeah, so I mean, it's a very deliberate choice, and I agree with you. I think this is the strongest segment of the film. This is really what the marketing was built around, and one of the things that I particularly like about it, there's been a lot of people who've gone into this like, oh no, like you don't even stay, you just turn right around and leave, and it's like, okay, obviously she should have, but not because of him. He plays this guy Keith. He turns out not to be the danger. It's the setup where you get lulled into this sense of security of like, oh, actually, this is a pretty safe situation after all. And the thing is that, like, I mean, I don't know what that experience would be like for a woman of color, because I am very much not. I'm very white. But I have been in situations where, like, my car has broken down and I needed, I was out in the middle of nowhere. A couple of times this happened to me 4 different times that I've had to get in cars with strangers, because I grew up in the times when we didn't have cell phones. And 2 of the times I was not by myself. I was with my best friend one time, I was with my brother, and then 2 other times I was totally by myself. And I just had to hope that I was getting in the car with someone who was not going to try to murder me. And none of those times, I did not get murdered, any of those times, clearly. But there is that sense. So it's like when people sit there and go, oh, there's absolutely no way I would stay. I think that what happens here in the way that this unfolds is it really sets up this, like, how do you leave in the middle of this situation? Like, not whether or not you should, because obviously the answer is you should leave, but it's pouring down rain. She's in a neighborhood she doesn't know because she's come from out of town. It's really dark, so she can't actually see what the rest of the neighborhood looks like, as much as people try to say, like, oh, I'd leave as soon as I saw the neighborhood. She can't see it because it's too dark out. And Keith is even saying, like, yeah, I don't know if you got a good look at this place, but I wouldn't be out there by myself at night. And, she's tried to call the company. Like, she's done everything that she can think of to try to keep herself safe. And then it turns out that Keith actually is a safe person. So the fact that she makes the decision to stay, like, to just go ahead and say, you know what, okay, I'm just going to have to go with this, all makes sense. The danger is lurking underneath and neither of them know about it, and that's a whole other situation.
Yeah, I think that the film does a very good job at kind of creating that sense of menace, and also him kind of recognizing it, right? Like, and he comes off as just being like, there's even this whole there's a whole sequence where she comes out of the bathroom and he's sitting there with someone had left a bottle of wine, right? As like a housewarming thing for the Airbnb. And he's kind of left it there. And he's like, well, I was going to open it. I didn't know if you wanted any, but I also knew that you would not drink it if I opened it without you being here. Right. And so you get it's this buildup where on the one hand, as the viewer, at least, you are mistrustful because you know that this is a horror movie and this is a creepy situation, etc. But at the same time, he does everything right in a lot of ways, which in turn makes you mistrustful. You're just like, oh, he's trying to lull her into a false sense of security, but so does she. Like, her reactions are very natural or very human. None of it is like it at this point in the film. There's no like her rushing in with her head down being like, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do this really dumb thing. Right. Which happens so often in horror films, including contemporary horror films. So the whole setup, I think, here is really good. And then you begin to get inklings that something else is going on in the house that may or may not be connected to Keith.
Right.
And it's not clear if they are or they aren't. There are a lot of red flags. There are a lot of red herrings as well that kind of get worked into that opening sequence. And then as the film goes on and it gets weirder and she finds out more about the neighborhood, where you've got this very nice house in the middle of like a completely run down, burnt out area that no one else seems to be living in even. And she's warned a couple of times, leave that place, leave the neighborhood, and she does. Like, she tries to. She goes back to the house, she begins packing her stuff, and then other things begin happening.
Right.
And see, this is where I think the film began to lose me a little bit. And it went from me being like, okay, yeah, I'll go along with you on this one, to, well, this is just getting stupid. It begins falling into some of those more common horror film tropes of just like, oh, there's, a creepy basement. There's a creepy room in the creepy basement that's like blocked off. There's a creepy tunnel. And at that point, just like, what fucking universe would a real person actually continue to go with that? And I think that at that level, the film is beginning to work against itself, because it's represented her as being a cautious, intelligent person who is doing her best to kind of be as safe as she can be, right? In a world that can be very dangerous for women, and in a situation that could be very dangerous. And rather than continuing to depict her like that, we've got like her just like, oh, I'm going to walk down into this creepy basement and this creepy door and follow this creepy guy that I don't really know who he is, and he's not answering me, and weird shit is going on. Like, at that point, be like, I'm out. I'm going to go to my car. I'm going to drive to the nearest police station. I'm going to tell them what's going on. They can investigate it, but I'm not going to be in the middle of this anymore. And and she's not forced into it. It's not like she has to go down that tunnel.
Right. Yeah.
It's not like she's trapped in that area. That was part of it for me.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, that's okay. What I thought was weird, first of all, was the fact that, so she's in town because she's going to this job interview. And it sounds like when she gets there that night, she only had the Airbnb for one night. She's just in town for this interview. And so what I didn't understand was why she didn't pack her stuff and take it with her. Like, why she was even planning to go back to the house in the first place. And then there's that note from Keith and stuff. So it's just like, okay. And I agree with you. I think that is where she obviously makes her mistakes, and it's really dumb, and definitely falls into the tropey stuff that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But there was something about it for me though, too, where I just kept going, well, I'm curious what's down there. Part of it is because when I saw the trailer, I felt like it really misdirected. And so I was more like looking forward to what was going to happen based on what I thought I had seen from the trailer. Because the way that was cut together, I thought that Justin Long's character was already in there. And I was still believing that Keith was a bad guy.
Yeah.
At this point. And so I was just like, this is dumb, but I'm also in it just because I want to know what's about to happen.
And I do think that the film plays on that of course you want to know, because we're sitting there, we're a horror film audience, we're watching a horror film, right? So of course she's going to go into the basement. Of course she's going to go down the creepy tunnel. Of course, all of those things are kind of the of course things.
Yeah.
But
like she first starts to do the whole like, nope, I'm not doing that. And like she does smart things where she gets the mirror and stuff. So it's like, okay, at least she's not just marching right in. But as she keeps getting more curious and fascinated with this creepy tunnel, and Keith is still not responding and he's not around or whatever, like, yeah, her decisions become progressively dumber.
See, and that's actually where the film began losing me, was when she looked down that tunnel and was like, oh my God. And then she's like, nope. And at that point, it's like, yes, we get this great, obviously the final girl or whatever, who's not going to do the dumb thing. And she almost immediately does the dumb thing.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the problem. And so the film, I think that the issue is the films obviously horror films condition us to want to see people put themselves in danger, because that's where the horror comes from, right?
Right.
We're kind of like, yeah, of course Laurie is going to run down the opposite direction onto a cul-de-sac or something like that. Of course she's going to hide in the closet, right? She's going to do all of the things that you do in a panic that we know are stupid, right? But that are going to keep the movie going and are going to get us there. The problem with this is that she has been structured as this very intelligent person who isn't panicking, right? Isn't being driven into the tunnel in some way. and
Right.
does it anyways because she's curious, and ultimately because the plot and the viewers require her to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was the beginning of my serious difficulty with this film, was that so much of the machinations of the film post the first, whatever, the opening sequence, felt like this is happening because it is required to happen, not because it is happening naturally within the construct of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you're going to go into the creepy tunnel, of course you're going to do this, of course, and then when you get to the reveal of the monster the first time, at least, I went into this film going like, oh, this is gonna be so creepy, and then I got to the reveal of the monster and I was like, huh?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then I was like, oh no, maybe it's something else, maybe it's something different, right? maybe it's like, maybe like what I saw is like just a part of the story.
Right.
And then as the film continued, I was like, nope, that's where they're going with, that's the monster. Okay. Great.
Mhm.
Like, and at that point, like the film, by the time the film shifted to Justin Long, and by the way, the Justin Long sequence takes it takes forever to get him to that fucking house.
Yeah, it does.
By the time it shifted to that, I was like, it had mostly lost me. And unless it was going to get me back in some way with him going into the tunnel, at that point, I was just like, you've none of this is particularly frightening. At this point, I just think it's stupid.
What
That
got
was where I
me,
was.
yeah, what kept me going with the Justin Long thing was the more you find out about what a shitty person he is, the more I just looked forward to him just dying a gruesome death.
Yeah. At that point, you're like, well, we want the mother to get him. So
Mhm.
to kind of flesh this out a little bit more, the reveal of the monster is this creepy naked woman who is like living in the tunnel beneath this house, and we're not quite certain what's going on there. And then we cut from that from what's her name, Tessa.
Tess, yeah.
Tess. Tess being menaced, being like, approached by this woman, and Keith being murdered, right?
Yeah.
And we cut from that to Justin Long, who is a Hollywood producer,
Like producer and star, and yeah.
Yeah, and so what we get kind of his backstory, and that he's kind of being driven out of Hollywood because he's sexually assaulted a woman, and he's not admitting to it, and all these other things are happening. But it turns out that he owns the house, right? That this is one of the properties that he owns.
Yeah.
And he winds up going back to the house, where he in turn then ends up in the basement, kind of discovers all of Tessa's stuff, all of Keith's stuff, is trying to figure out what's going on, and eventually goes into the basement, goes into the tunnel, and is captured by the mother, who is this very, like I said, creepy naked woman who's obviously very ill.
Deformed and
Yeah.
yeah. Also,
And
by the way, played by a dude in a lot of prosthetics.
yeah, and this again, so the mother, who we eventually learn is the result of like multi-generational incest by the original owner of the house, who's like kidnapping women and raping them and having babies, and then raping the babies, and like, so we learn all of this stuff, and the mother at this point is like obsessed with capturing people and feeding them out of a bottle and treating them like babies. And this is where, for me, the film went from creepy to kind of predictable to I am deeply bothered by this.
This is
And
where I was like, I don't think Lauren's gonna like this movie at all. But
well, first of
then the
all,
way the conversations were going and the way you were like, I don't know, I'm looking forward to it. And I was like, maybe she will. I don't think so. Because I also had a problem with this too. So, but I also didn't want to like discourage you from watching. I don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's the for me, it was the disgust with which the film treats, first of all, the female body.
Yeah.
And we've seen this a lot, and even in films that I enjoyed, the hatred of women, and particularly older women.
Yeah, because she's
Um,
definitely over 40.
yeah, of like this monstrous mother figure, right? And this is typical in horror. This is nothing new. This film didn't invent it or anything like that. But at this point, I was just like, this horror of the female body, and this horror of disability, and of this woman who is, as we learn, none of this is her fault. She's a prisoner, basically. She's the result of male violence. But the film relies so much on her monstrosity for its fear. the fear factor, right? It doesn't. We even meet like her father, right?
Yeah.
And we meet
who for some reason is still alive
and is like living in the basement as well and can't speak or something like that. Like, and we don't get much of his monstrosity. Even though there's, a little bit of conversation about that. But for the most part, he's not this disgusting, repellent, horrifying figure. It's her. She's the disgusting, repellent, horrifying figure. And so much of the horror of the film is reliant on you being repulsed by her.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, they introduce us to Frank, who is her father, through these flashbacks. And this is actually one of the ways that the movie kind of, or the trailers kind of tricked me, because they show in the trailer, they show a shot of the neighborhood looking all nice. And so when I'm watching the movie and I'm thinking about the part where Bill Skarsgård is just like, yeah, you didn't see this neighborhood. And I'm thinking like, oh, he's lying because it's a really nice neighborhood, right? But it's because of this one shot from this flashback. But that's where they introduced Frank. I appreciate the fact that they don't actually show him attacking any of the women. They just let you know very clearly what he's doing, that he's kidnapping these women and taking them hostage and stuff, and obviously raping them. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Like the clear monster and the clear fear of this movie is supposed to be not in Frank or his actions or even how those actions led to the mother, but specifically the figure of the mother herself.
Well, and that I think in a lot of ways works against some of the things that the film had been setting up. So this whole idea about these red flags, right, at the beginning of the movie, the whole idea about the AJ character played by Justin Long, who is, like, he's basically being accused of raping like a co-star or someone else who worked on a television show with him. And he starts out saying, well, no, this is a total lie. This never happened. And then as the film goes on, we learn more. And basically it's like, yeah, he definitely did like rape her, even though he had the idea that like, oh, I'm just kind of an aggressive guy.
Right. Yeah.
And so the film, and then you've got Frank. So the film posits this male monstrosity, right? This creation of female monsters through male violence, but it doesn't follow through on that. And instead it relies so much on the disgust with which we perceive the mother, that, and even calling her the mother, right? She doesn't even have a name. She's not a human being as far as the film is concerned. She is the product of male violence, right? And everything about her is determined by male violence.
And again, she's also not even played by a woman. She's played by a man in prosthetics.
Yeah, and I found it very disturbing and not in a good way, not in like isn't this an interesting commentary? Isn't this creepy kind of way? It was much more like you're using all of these tropes, right? That that anyone who's watched horror films will recognize at some level. But particularly this whole concept of the monstrous feminine, which has been pulled apart and discussed and debated by feminist critics for a very long time. And you're just using it in this hackneyed, bludgeoning way, and not really following through on the promises that your film has made. There are so many promises that the film sets up, particularly in that opening sequence, but even in the sequences with AJ, and never pays off. And so to me, it was like, oh, we get this twist, but it's not really even a twist. It's just like a different movie.
Yeah. Well, and it's really not even a twist, it's an explanation. And so often that's the case. People call them twists, but they're not. They're just, this is the direction the story was going the whole time. You just, just because you weren't expecting it doesn't mean it's a twist.
No, exactly. And then we kind of get to, so Tess and AJ manage to escape. And they're fleeing out of the house, and Tess goes back actually to save AJ, and because of course she does.
Well, she doesn't know that he's a terrible person.
Well, and this might be again that kind of that attempt at commentary about the way that women behave and the way that men behave.
Because the whole reason she ended up in that situation in the first place was because she went in to try to save Keith too, and this is very much her being a maternal caregiving person.
Yeah, and and so again, this does feel like it was written by a man because if it was written by a woman, honestly, it would be more nuanced. Because a lot of male writers and a lot of male filmmakers, even when they're meaning to make actually talk about male violence and danger, etc., still use these really heavy-handed metaphors, these really heavy-handed concepts of what it is to be a woman in this world. And the fact that there is still nothing more terrifying to a woman than a man, as far as they are concerned, right? And a lot of these films, and this is why I kind of jokingly compared it to Blade Runner 2049, but this was kind of where I'm actually edging more towards that, which is that sense that that women spend their entire lives obsessed with men. Being afraid of men, being terrified of male violence, being aware of the existence of men. And there's this constant reinforcement that this is the only way that women live their lives, right? And Tessa's downfall is that she's too caring. She's too maternal. She's too, I need to help this man, right? And she shouldn't be like that almost. And then we get nearing the end. So Tess and AJ escape, and we get nearing the end, kind of AJ giving this speech about, am I like a bad person? And again, I think that this is intended in the right way. And we're meant to go like, yes, this is what this is all about, right? But again, it felt so heavy-handed and so hackneyed to me, especially at that point in the film, that I was like, this is not commentary about like what a bad man he is or men being bad or anything like that. This is just a dude who like read Feminist Criticism 101 at some point and never actually paid attention to any of the content. That was really how I felt by the end of this movie.
Yeah.
You
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And it's funny because it's like I don't think that you and I actually disagree that much on it. I think where the difference was that, first of all, I was not overly hyped on this when I went to see it. I was just like, it was in the theater. I knew a few people had talked about it. I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll go watch it. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I had fun watching it because, again, like I said, that trailer really set me up for some things that ended up not being exactly how I thought. And so it did keep me guessing a little bit. And so even though I definitely had problems with the whole concept of the mother character and yeah, I think your analogy there of like, or not analogy, but the commentary on like they read one article about feminist film criticism and ran with it. I do definitely get that. And I had some issues with this. And even right up until the very, very end, when even at the end, AJ is basically still trying to screw this girl over and whatever. But I just, for me, I think because it was something that I just kind of went into just looking to be entertained, that's exactly what I got out of it. And so I enjoyed watching the movie. I don't think it's like the greatest, it's definitely not the greatest horror movie of the year. I thought it was fun. I definitely think that it has some problems. I really, really don't want them to make a sequel or a prequel. I know they're probably going to do both. I want this to be just a standalone movie that I just had a fun time watching.
Fair. Like, I do think that, like you're saying, I think that the film got very hyped after it initially, like when
some of the comments you were hearing were ridiculous. Like, share some of those.
Yeah, there was someone, and again, this is social media is into hyperbole. Critics in particular,
also horror is definitely subjective, of course. Yes. We know that. So
yeah, but yeah, and I absolutely, and here's the thing: there are some things that don't necessarily scare me, but I can see the quality of the work. And so for instance, I said the other day I recently saw Saw, right, which I enjoyed. It did not scare me. Like, it was not like, oh my God, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen. But I was like, I really appreciate what they're doing here. Like, I appreciate what the film is doing.
Yeah.
It's well constructed, right? That kind of thing. So I think that you can watch a horror film and not necessarily be frightened by it, but still appreciate it. That was not the case for me with this.
Right.
I don't appreciate this film. But yeah, definitely some of it was because of like building the way that it was built up and the way that horror critics and people who love horror were talking. Like there's one person who was saying, I watch almost nothing but horror films. Just like, okay. And this one was so frightening I couldn't breathe. And even before I saw this movie, I was just like, I'm pretty positive that's hyperbole. Like I can't imagine that this film is that scary, but maybe it is. Maybe this is actually like a really amazing thing. The problem was, and I knew it, and in fact I even tweeted about it when the film came out. I was like, the last time you did this was Hereditary. And I remember that movie and I was mad about it. Mm-hmm. And I got even more mad about it the more I thought about it. So I don't trust you on this, but yeah, the film was really hyped up, and it was particularly hyped up of this whole, you've got to go into it cold, don't know the twist. And I was waiting, like, honestly, I was sitting there going like, okay, what's the twist going to be? What's the big thing, right? What is this going to result in? And then, like I say, it happened, and I literally was waiting through the rest of the movie to see another twist.
Oh, no.
I couldn't imagine in my heart of hearts, I was like, this can't be what everyone was going crazy about. Like, this can't be it, because I did find it pretty predictable. As soon as this mother figure shows up, I was just like, oh, I know what this is. Like, I know exactly what this is. And it was exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a problem for me. Whereas with a film, the other film that this was being compared to a lot was Malignant, which came out last year. And which we've talked about a lot, and I absolutely love.
I do too.
Yeah, no, we both talked about like how much we enjoyed this movie. That this is one of the best horror films of the past few years, and it's batshit. It absolutely is, and I would say Barbarian is too in its own way. I think that with Malignant, for me, it was a better constructed film. Mm-hmm. I did not see it coming, admittedly. Some people I know did, or kind of guessed that there was some kind of a different relationship between Gabriel and
I didn't guess exactly what the answer was, but I definitely was on the right track pretty early on.
Yeah, so I think that's part of the strength of Malignant, actually, is that the twist is great. The reveal of like who and what Gabriel is, I still is one of my favorite horror movie moments, because I was literally like, talking about things you don't do in horror movies. I don't do this. I was sitting, my mouth was open. I was just like, oh my God. But I think that the greater strength of that film is that it still works when you know the twist. And in fact, in a lot of ways, I've compared it to, and it's a very different film, obviously, but I've compared it to Psycho in the sense that even if you know everything that happens in the movie, even if this is your second or third time watching it, it's still deeply enjoyable. And actually, you get more jokes and bits of humor kind of filtered throughout the entire film that make you, enrich it. Like, it feels like a richer movie the more times you watch it. I'm not watching Barbarian a second time. I didn't feel that way at the end of Barbarian. I didn't feel like this is something that was really well plotted, really well thought out. This was by a director and a writer who really understands the way that horror functions and how to make not just a good horror film, but all good horror films are ultimately good films. Mm-hmm. And I did not get the sense that this film was a good film when you really came down to it. I didn't get the sense that the director or the writer knew what he was doing in the midst of all of this. And granted, it might be unfair to compare someone like Zach Cregger to James Wan, who obviously has a lot of films under his belt now, and did before he directed Malignant, but there is not that same dialogue or understanding of horror and of basic plotting in Barbarian as there is in something like Malignant. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, not really. I think we're good. I wanted to give you the final word. So
all right. So unless there's something else you want to talk about, Karen, I'm happy to hear other, like, you definitely like this film better than me, but it also sounds like we we both recognize the not so great aspects.
Oh,
of this.
totally. Yeah, no, I definitely recognize this isn't a great movie, but I had fun with it. I've also only watched it the one time. I haven't watched it again. I was hoping to before we recorded this, and I actually started it. Um, and I got through the first part where they're like just went to bed, like she just decided to stay the night when, everything is still unfolding. So it's like I was watching that going, this is still a really good intro. I stand by this intro.
It's a good intro. It is definitely a good intro. I think the first act is very strong in a lot of ways. And honestly, I can tell you exactly the point that it breaks. and it's when she says nope and then 5 minutes later walks down the tunnel.
Yeah.
Like at that point, that's where it broke for me.
Yeah.
But everything before that, I think, is a very good setup. And that's even maybe why I was more disappointed in this, because I wanted it all to be that good.
You know what would have probably worked a lot better is if, I know we would have missed out on Georgina, who was a good actress, her character Tess. But I think that this film, other than the mother thing, but just the horror parts of it, or her character at least, it would have worked better if she had said nope, packed up her shit, walked out the door, and ran into Justin Long on his way in going, "Who the fuck are you?" And her going like, "Well, I rented this house, but now I'm leaving." And then he goes in and he's the one that discovers Keith and stuff. Like, I think that would have been a better setup.
I like that. I like that. And also like you pointed out, AJ is such an unlikable character. I was perfectly happy to see him suffer. Like,
oh yeah, he needed to be brutalized.
Yeah, I was fine with that. And actually, like, it's just, to me, it's just like, that would be more feminist, really. It's just like, yeah, this like horrific mother just beating the shit out of this man for the next hour. It's just like, I'm down for that right there. Yeah, let us make your movies, obviously.
I'm telling you, I would kill it as a producer. I just need money, apparently.
So that's our opinion on Bebebe.
Bebebe, yes.
Bebebe on Barbarian. It is on HBO Max. Obviously, if you listen, we've spoiled everything. If you still haven't seen it, go and watch it. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you do agree with us, disagree with us. If you are the producer of this film, who have apparently been attacking like critics for saying they didn't like it.
Have they really?
I
know there's another one that's been happening too, but I didn't realize that was going on with this one too. Jeez.
This one, like the production company responding to critics, to people saying like, I didn't really care for it, and then them like actually responding. I'm not important enough for them to do that with me, but I've seen it with some other bigger accounts on Twitter, and yeah, it was actually like, this is a really bad look, guys.
Well, and the funny thing is they always love critics when they love their movies.
Well, and Barbarian has a very high Rotten Tomatoes rating. A lot of people really loved it. Like this, we're definitely in the minority in a lot of ways in terms of critics.
Yeah, I personally would have given it still a fresh score too because of that binary. Like, I wouldn't say it's rotten. I know you would. I wouldn't, but that also doesn't mean that I'm like rush out and what. I don't know. Yeah. I hate the binary.
The binary sucks. The algorithm sucks. It always comes down to, is it good or is it bad? It's just like, well, some of it's good. It's always that sense of balance. But yeah, so that's what we think of Barbarian. It is available to stream via HBO Max, and I think also available to rent if you don't have HBO Max. So, I don't know. Check it out if you feel like it. Or watch Malignant. Like, just regardless of whether you watch Barbarian, watch Malignant. Like, so good.
Definitely watch Malignant for sure. That could be an interesting double feature. Watch Barbarian first, and then Malignant,
and then a good movie. So I think that will close us out for this little mini episode discussing Barbarian. Thank you all so much for listening to us. And of course, we want to always thank all of our patrons who are such lovely people. You all know who you are. And if you want to follow us, listen to us, etc., we are on Twitter, and Instagram at Citizen Dame Pod, and we are on Letterboxd at Citizen Dame. And you can also follow us individually. Karen, where are you?
I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
And I am on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at LH Business. Thank you so much for listening to us, y'all. And we will be back with a full-length episode later on.
Bye.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who are you?
What? Who are you?
This is 476 Barbary, right?
I don't know. Yeah. I think so.
You don't know?
No. I don't live here. I'm renting this place. It's the middle of the night. I don't have it top of my head, the address.
No, I'm renting this place.
What? Are you sure you have the right place?
Yeah, I booked it like a month ago.
This is unbelievable.
What am I supposed to do?
I don't know. Why don't you come inside and we'll call these idiots.